of the people and by the people, because it's the same thing. There's a lot that goes into the phrase land-grant college, and almost all the time, all of us completely take it for granted, when in fact is a revolutionary concept. Revolutionary. And it is absolutely has to do with agriculture, but at a time when Americans knew agriculture was the future, not the past. That's what's people think of agriculture as this quaint little thing. Fred, come on down here. Remember Mr. Green Jeans? Do you remember Mr. Green Jeans? Yes. Well, like, you know, if you were Mr. Green Jeans. You guys remember Mr. Green Jeans? Wasn't that his name?
Yeah.
I think it was his name. Captain Kangaroo.
Right.
Well, Americans think of farmers as what? Quaint. You know, cute little things. Right? No, don't they?
Right.
With a pitchfork, yeah. And so, but in the 19th century, that was the leading industry in all of the United States. And it was the future, it wasn't the past. Now, it still is actually the future, because we take completely for granted the fact that this is the first time in history, probably the 20th century, that most of the people, most of the time, have enough to eat. Matter of fact, you know, many of us, too much to eat. So what? But that is absolutely not. Human history has been a period of regular bouts of starvation. Absolutely everywhere. Now, agriculture, 10,000 years ago, was the giant revolution that started it, but it's only in modern times of this vast food-producing capacity that led the way in the United States. So, but let's go back just a bit, okay? Because here's our land-grant college of our little spot up here. Now, I'll just give you guys know, I spent all day today putting in the fancy things on Keynote. I've never used Keynote before. This is a new program to me. Do any of you guys use Keynote? Well, Joy, do you use it? Well, I probably shouldn't have used it, bought it, because it lets you do a lot of things that waste a lot of time, you know. Which is why when I called Todd Paris today, I said, Todd, do you have a picture, a high-resolution picture? He says, oh, I'm glad you did this so far in advance, you know. But anyway, there it is. All right, that's our beginning of our little land-grant college, the old main building sitting here on College Hill. And there's the seal, the first seal of the University of Alaska, Alaska Agricultural College and School of Mines. I love this picture for a bunch of reasons. The picture and the seal. I might talk more about the seal later, but President Bunnell said of that seal, that's a picture of Mount McKinley as seen from the steps of the main building. With, I think what he meant to add was, with the Hubble telescope. But, now, so I've published books with the University of Alaska Press. Ross, you have, oh, and we have the provost, it's under the provost. So the University of Alaska Press, Susan, I'll just show you, they published this book back in the 1960s, Vic Fisher's book about the Constitutional Convention. I love this book. There it is right there. And what do you think is on the cover? What do you think the cover is supposed to show? Denali from where, though? This is what according to the University of, now, Susan, you are the provost. I think you should talk to Joan about this. This is what it says inside the book. Now, the thing is, that's the other thing. When you get old, you have weaker eyesight. Or else, you know, I love the Mark Twain joke. You know, he said when he was young, he had a great memory. Great memory. I mean, he had the world's best memory, he said. And he could remember anything, whether it happened or not. But now, as an old man, all he could remember was the stuff that didn't happen. So, oh, maybe this isn't that fault. But anyway, so a school is about vision. Now, in this case, okay, maybe the vision was slightly off, but that's the wonderful thing about a college. And in fact, everyone is supposed to come together. It's a community. We're supposed to be collegial and work together and think about the future and the long range and our place in the universe and science and research and everything. And we'd have none of this without this Land Grant Act and Representative and then Senator Morrill, however you would say his name, in 1862. Now I forget what oh yeah, Now these are a few of the buildings that are these are going to be built in the university here in the near future, I think. You know, I'm sure.
Oh, are we going to get the Ivy?
That's right, yeah. So, you know, okay, none of these buildings have ever been built here, and they never will be. Okay, now that's really sort of an important thing, because I'll get to that in a second, of what's the difference between a land-grant college and all these. Now, that's in England, but most of the colleges in America before 1862 were private, religious colleges, and they concentrated on Latin and Greek and the 7 subjects of the liberal arts, and I'll show you that in a second. But they didn't talk about anything, really, that had much practical application, because colleges saw themselves as a world apart and deigned to stray from the Latin and Greek curriculum. Matter of fact, it was bitterly debated in the late 19th century and early 20th, somewhat similar today, people decrying the future, because if you can't know all the Latin declinations, then in fact there's something clearly wrong with you. But we don't have those buildings, but we do have the Eielson building and the plan. Now, this is my favorite headline from the farthest north Collegian, President Bunnell's, the official publication of the University of Alaska. What do you notice is wrong with this? The University of anyway, I just thought it was so great that they make the typo in a headline that's about the future and how great it's all going to be. Well, there's 2 buildings in particular I want you to pay attention to. Oh, see, I wonder if I can, I guess I can't show my thing. Okay, well, if I had a laser pointer, just imagine if I had one. How am I going to do this? Well, I wonder why there's no mouse on here. Well, can you guys imagine where the Eielson building is on this? No, don't worry about it. Well, let's look at a picture of it. This, of course, is the dream of the Eielson building, and that's the reality. Now, this is the one building that we have that was meant to emulate those other ivy-covered walls. And of course, this is the Eielson building today. And what's that, Bill?
Is that called Unit 5?
Oh, no, I have a picture of Unit 5, though. I'll show you, yeah. Good. You're probably the only person here who knows anything about Unit 5. We always had great names for President Bell, some of the buildings, so Unit 5 is the north end of what's now the Eielson building. But just to show you, that corner, this is the southwest corner of the Eielson building, still has that buttress or whatever you call it right there. And you can see it in the original construction from 1936 right there. Now, when the Eielson building was first built, as you could see, it was only 1 story long, and it was only about 30 to 40 feet long. 1 story high, 30 or 40 feet long. And it was built like a typical Alaskan cabin in sections. And that's why the thing about Unit 5 comes into play. So here's Unit 5. Oh, wait. No, that's not Unit 5. Doggone it. I wonder if I'm showing you the wrong one. I might have skipped ahead. Well, oh, no, I didn't. Okay, here we go. Okay. Well, okay, I have some goofy, just to let you know, animations coming up here in a second, so don't be frightened by them. But anyway, this is actually a picture of the university in 1938, shot by Bradford Washburn. And I have some other examples of it I can show you, because this is such a fantastic photo of the university. But the 2 buildings we're going to look at are the Eielson building and what we now call Signers Hall, or the museum, because those are the closest that came to this sort of ivy-covered wall. So let me just show you. That's actually an overlay, almost as near as I could get it, of today and 1938. Let me kill the lights away. Oh no, wait, these lights don't work. And I made it slightly, I tried to make it as transparent as I could, so to see. But and I'll go back a second, but you'll get at the idea of where we're located. You can see Siners Hall and Eielson there, right south of the Greening Building. Okay, and let me go back a second. So that's 1938, and this is more or less today.
In the park, they're all them round things. They're hay. Just to cut.
Oh, the hay. That's right. Yeah, this is the, and I put that in here originally when I did this, and I was going to put in a caption of the hay fields, but that's the hay fields right there. President Bunnell, among his many things, and you can see the bales right there.
But they're not bales, they were loose hay, the balers hadn't come out yet.
Oh, okay.
So they were made of loose hay, and they were shaped round with the slope on top to keep the rain out.
What do you call that?
Wine, cocks of hay.
With cocks of hay, okay.
Reefs were the bigger ones.
Oh, okay, okay.
You put so many of the little cocks
Okay,
together.
okay. Well, so among President Bunnell's things, he refused, or he wanted to make every inch of the university pay off. So, yeah, so here's the hay fields. Okay, you could see them right there. The other thing, President Bunnell's rules, no trees could be planted on the campus. He allowed no trees because they were such a pain to mow around. So when they cleared the land, that was the end of the trees. This is Siners Hall, what we now call Siners Hall, and that's the Eielson building right there. Okay, and just to show you, this was in the University of Alaska, the future. That's the Eielson building, and that's Siners Hall right there. Originally, the Eielson building was intended to be one of 7 buildings. They were all supposed to be identical. And that's why it only has that funny thing here on this, okay, no, back here. Oops, I went too far. Okay. Oh, hold on. These are the other buildings, remember, that didn't get built quite yet. Well, you know, maybe President Gamble has this in his plan. I don't think so. Anyway, right there is, oh, I see. I went the wrong way. Is that thing, right? And that thing is that thing, and that thing is that thing. So it only appears on the southwest corner of the building. The reason there isn't one on the other side is because we're supposed to have all these buildings matching, right? So now, let me see here. That's what it looks like now. Okay, now these are my fancy graphics, I think, coming up. Took me about 3 hours to do this, so I want you to enjoy this. Yeah. Okay, well, here we go. So I made this small. Now, of course, that was always the problem, the fear that the building was going to burn down. That's modern times, crashing in. Now here's, remember, that's the other. Oh, wait, maybe we have another special effect. That's the Siners Hall. Well, anyway, okay. Okay, so that's it. But anyway, there they are there, okay? But there generally was a fear that everything is going to burn down because Siners Hall, what we now call Siners Hall, which used to be the museum, and before that was the gym and the library and a whole bunch of other stuff, they were the only concrete buildings. In this picture, everything else is wood, everything. Now, this remained the problem until the 1950s. And let me just show you, let's see, document camera just for a second. This is a pamphlet that President Patty and Dr. Wood, I think it was Patty, I don't think it was Wood, came out in the 1950s trying to get money for the university. So let me just show you, this is what I love about this. So this is your university, and it says, what's the future of Alaska's higher education? Is it this? or that, right? People going to state-side universities, which we can't have that. So here is the university has grown, and what we need is less of this, of the one of the dorms, club dorm, and then more of this. Is that Nerland Hall? I guess so. Don't you think? So anyway, they've got a lot of great things in here, including our Arctic research component. Oops, don't get nauseous if you. But this is what I love about the picture of the old Maine. Here it is. Let's see here. Here's the caption. No, but it was torn down, but it should have burned, I guess. So what it says is, this is the main building. The center was built in 1918, a wing added in 23, and then the new wing, the final wing in 25. Great service to the territory. Fires have started in the building several times, but since the building is closely guarded, the fires were quickly extinguished. The structure has had a charmed life. A major fire would destroy much valuable equipment and likely spread to other buildings. The building is so old and out of date, it's expensive to heat and maintain. We do not want to erect new buildings near it. It now houses the departments of liberal arts, biology, BA, chemistry, ed, and numerous faculty offices. Our proposed construction plan preparing us to tear down this building. And it was, we sort of need Reagan. You know, it could have been, Dr. Patty, tear down this building. But anyway, it did get torn down. It's right in front of, well, the Bunnell building where it sits, it is just like 10 or 15 feet south of where this thing sat. But so going back to the fire, to this, well, I'm not going to repeat the things. But I want to talk about this. This is why the need for the land-grant college evolved. Because education was Greek and Latin till at least the middle of the 19th century in the United States. Despite the fact that there were a number of what were so-called polytechnic institutes and things that developed like MIT, technological colleges, the overwhelming idea of higher education was studying Latin and Greek, period. And the idea was if you mastered Latin and Greek and literature, and largely its memorization and recitation, that gives you the basic skills or discipline, because the word discipline comes from the Latin word which means to learn. So the whole idea is, in fact, that that's the educational training, the boot camp that people actually need. Now, so the problem is, you have this rapidly growing country. America is exploding at the seams of the 19th century, and the final burst is clearly going to come as a result of the Civil War. It's no accident at all that President Lincoln signed this bill in 1862, that creating the land-grant colleges, and that President Buchanan had vetoed it shortly before the war. The reason is the South and those who were opposed to expansion of federal power would never have allowed the land-grant bill to go through. They had done their best repeatedly to block it. The idea of having land-grant colleges or somehow indirectly funding new higher education institutes had been around for 20 or 30 years. But it's the absence of the Southern senators and congressmen, really, that make it overwhelmingly popular. The same thing with the Homestead Act, the same thing with the railroad grants. Because the South feared Western expansion, because they knew as America moved west, new states were added, the voting power of the South would be diminished, and slavery essentially would be doomed. Actually, it's almost identical to the opposition to Alaska statehood in the 1950s, except at that time, it wasn't really about slavery, but it was about segregation laws. And Alaska was principally blocked because Southerners did not want any new states that would vote to, for cloture to end the Southern, what do you call it when they talk all the time? filibusters on the civil rights bills. And remember, the South, as one writer said, the Senate, the U.S. Senate in the 1950s was the South's revenge for the Civil War because they controlled the Senate and they controlled all the senior committees in the House because of their longevity in both bodies, and the fact that the South was a one-party state. There were no Republicans in the South, none really until Nixon in 1968. So we got the Greeks, and there's the 7 classic liberal arts from left to right. The arithmetic, geometry, music, astronomy, logic, law, rhetoric, and grammar. And what I like about this is that the initial 3 here on the bottom, this is actually the seal of the University of Pennsylvania, still it's essentially still the seal of the University of Pennsylvania, based on the 7 liberal arts that a college-educated person could master. I think there's 7, right? 3, 4, 7. Yeah, that's the 7 liberal arts. What I love is that the first 3 were called the trivium, and then the next 4 are the quadrivium, the 4. The 3 roads are the first 3, grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And then the 4, math, philosophy, astronomy, and theology are the next 4. Look at this heavy metal band. They call themselves the Trivium. And there's 4 of them. Well, anyway, and here they are. They're really proud of themselves. I mean, but this is called the quad. This quartet. Isn't that great? Anyway, they are called the quad. I found this on the internet. They're the quadridium or whatever they'd say. Okay. Okay. So here we go to Justin Morrill of Vermont, and absolutely he has a really interesting background. He comes from really poor circumstances. He's the child of blacksmiths and the oldest of 10 children. His education ends when he's 14 years old. That's really the end. He does go to what was called in those days an academy for a couple of years, but that was to the end of it. And he never went to college, never had the opportunity. Became a very successful businessman, essentially with stuff working with his family. And Fred, you're absolutely correct. He spent 44 years in Congress from 1855 to 1898, the last 32 in the Senate. And he was known as, and I forget now why, because I'm new to this keynote thing, I think I made several versions of this talk. And because I have no memory, I forget that I did it. But he was known as the father of the Senate at the time that he died, because he was the longest serving congressman in American history up till 1898. Oh yeah, good, I left it in there, the father of the Senate. And then today he still ranks 20th all time. Ted Stevens, for comparison, is 40th. Just shows you how long that he was in there. Ted is 40th. But they're similar in a sense that a very long tenure and a fact that Morrill became convinced of this idea of a new system of colleges. Now here's a quote I got from the North American Review. I screwed it up. Well, I got the quotation in there. By the mid-19th century, clearly a need for advanced education on some other basis than the literature of Greece and Rome, was needed. That's 1867. That's looking back 5 years afterwards and saying, America has a serious problem. And the only way around it is federal involvement. Now here's the Morrill Act. This is what it sort of involves. The important thing to note is it is land grants to fund an entirely new type of college. Revolutionary. They never existed anywhere on earth. This is the beginning of something completely different. And that in itself is the issue. It's federal funding for higher education, which never existed before. Now, in its years, this would have a problematic up and down chart. I'll get closer. A problematic history, because the funding wasn't always as effective, perhaps, as it could have been or should have been. But what you have to know is that the federal government had a policy of acres for education. See, remember, in the 19th century, we funded the federal government strictly on the tariff. There was no income tax. And so basically, the federal government was so small pre-Civil War, very few Americans would recognize it today. As far as it's so many things that we completely take for granted going back to the Civil War, like, for instance, national banks, which didn't exist really until the Civil War. Well, so he proposed land or acres for education, for higher education. The federal government had always made school section grants in Western lands to support up to 12th grade, you know, the lower educational ranks. That was very common. That was completely accepted. The revolutionary part here is to say, okay, we're going to do it for higher education, which some people thought was nothing but a pure luxury. And literally, the farther west you went, the more skeptical people were about higher education anyway. But so he provides in this grant an entirely new system. And this is the quote. It's really crucial. The leading object shall be to promote the liberal and practical education of the industrial classes. He does not intend everybody going these to be farmers or even industrial workers. But his idea is that anybody should be able to study anything. Now, farming at this time, of course, is the big industry. And certainly he doesn't look down upon it. Nobody does. I mean, this is what makes it popular and successful. And heaven knew we needed research, or the application of research to agricultural techniques, because that was the backbone of the U.S. economy still. And remember, this is before any of the transcontinental railroads are built. And Morrill's famous line, he said, the farmers could grow 2 blades of grass where only one had grown before. Now, this is a quote from him in the 1890s, just to show you. He says, it is perhaps, from Morrill, needless to say, these colleges were not established or endowed for the sole purpose of teaching ag. Their object was to give an opportunity for those engaged in industrial pursuits to obtain some knowledge of the practical sciences related to agriculture and the mechanic arts, such as they could not then obtain at most of our institutions called classical colleges, where the languages Greek and Latin, French and German absorb perhaps 2/3 of all the time of the students while in college. And then the final graph. It never was intended to force the boys of farmers going into these institutions so to study that they should all come out farmers. It was merely intended to give them an opportunity to do so, and to do so with advantage if they saw fit. So, but what's incredible about this, the most earth-shaking part, is the federal investment in higher education. That's what's different here. And this makes all the difference. Many of the land-grant colleges in the United States are the most prestigious research and teaching universities that have ever existed now. And initially, they were scoffed at by the classical colleges, because the whole idea they thought of something that was practical was antithetical to the idea of higher education. So every time I hear, and that's why I think when we say that we're also a space and a sea and land, sea, and space grant institution. To a certain extent, those modern applications, because it became a sea grant university in the 60s, I forget when the application was made, and the space was like in the 80s or 90s. The part back here then is the funding mechanism. Now, the funding mechanism was kind of goofy. Initially, the compromise they worked out was that each state would get about 30,000 acres for each member of their congressional delegation. So a 3-member delegation, 2 senators, and 1 representative would get around 90,000 acres. By 1915, when James Wickersham came up with this idea, he said Alaska should have its land-grant college. Things had changed quite a bit, because 1915 is the middle of the First World War. Now the federal government is a vastly larger presence in the lives of Americans. The land-grant colleges are no longer controversial as they were initially in the 1860s. Clearly, agriculture is still the key thing, because we are built around the experiment station. That's why the campus is here initially, because of the experimental farm. Now, the fact is, in Alaska, we got almost no land because because none of the land in Alaska was surveyed. So, or not, I shouldn't say none, but almost none of it. The estimates were, and I mean, this figure sounds so ridiculous, it's hard to believe. The conservative estimate, well, what do you think the conservative estimate would have been of how to survey all the land of Alaska in the 1940s? Anybody take a guess? What's that?
You told me 10,000.
Yep, that's the conservative. Exactly right, Nancy, it is. That's the conservative. What's the unconservative guess? Did you hear what she said? 10,000 years. That's before, like I said, before the invention of writing. I think the wheel isn't 10,000 years old. Okay, the non-conservative guess, 40,000 years. That's a big picture. Anyway, so basically, us as a land-grant college, right? When we were founded from the beginning, President Bunnell, the whole idea was to follow in the wake of this new idea of a school where anybody could go. There was no tuition at the university till after the 1950s. There was no tuition. You paid room and board. And remember when we first opened in 1921, or 22, first students arrived. There were 6 students, the very first day, 6 students and 6 faculty members. And President Bunnell always said, actually Dr. Cashin, Bill Cashin, who's a great historian of the university and math teacher here for many years, and who knew President Bunnell, he said, you know, Bunnell never liked to say this thing about the 6 students and 6 teachers, because he was a teacher, damn it. So there were 7 teachers and 6 students. So, and no administrators, I guess, according to President Bunnell, though he was also the janitor. So what does this mean for us? It means, in fact, that we have this unbelievable heritage here. We're so lucky that, in fact, during the most terrible time of American history, 1862, Civil War is still going terrible. It's a disaster. It's terrible. Matter of fact, the act, one of the great things about is that because of the Civil War distracted everybody, that's why the railroad grants, the Homestead Act, and this in part got through, because there was a lot more, you know, this would have been much more revolutionary and people would know more about it if it didn't occur during the war. But you hear people say land-grant college and they have no idea what it's about. They have no idea that this was one of the greatest American innovations in history for a country like ours, which didn't have a strong federal presence, to figure out that acres could support education. And of course now this is the fundamental problem that we face in the future, is the funding mechanism. So I think that's my last slide here, the way I did it. Yeah, okay, so I'd be glad to, oh, it didn't turn off. Okay, well, all right. Now I actually could talk about this like forever and a lot of other different things. So anybody have questions, or what else should we do? Yes?
Economics enter into the picture.
Say that again, Ruth?
When did home economics enter into the picture?
Well, I remember Mrs. Walsh. So when I was a student at the university, Mrs. Walsh was what's Miss Walsh? What was? Ann Walsh. Oh yeah. Still taught home ec. But tell you the truth, I don't know. Well, I brought the catalog. I don't really know much about home economics, to tell you the truth. I brought the catalog. Anyway, I have the list here in my other, and I could show you about what the courses. Maybe I should show you. There's a list of the first courses that we had. Believe it or not, in the 1920s. Here, let me show you. Now this I have in PowerPoint. Dr. Duck, yeah. There's my there's my tax. I didn't do my taxes yet, though, unfortunately. This is why.
Terrence?
Yeah. Am I supposed to stop? Or?
No.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking about the question, and we're
yeah.
not quite sure.
Yeah, these guys know. Yeah.
We know that it probably happened before 1890, which is a half.
Oh, yeah.
Time. So sometime probably between 1870 and let's say 1885. Yeah, 87. some of that area is when home economics became part of land-grant institutions.
You know,
The agriculture and economics is even there.
My alma mater was chartered in 1887, 1883, and at that time, part of the charter was the domestic arts, which was home economics.
yeah, and see, now the idea is that what's so wonderful about home economics, the extension service, I think KUAC, the Community and Technical College, these are all part of a land-grant mission, see, in a way. I mean, even though maybe it isn't officially, that's the way I have always thought of it, because, you know, studying Latin and Greek is actually fine for people who want to do that. But the real science, matter of fact, in the 1860s, this one author said they shouldn't be called agricultural colleges. See, some people get the wrong idea about them and they think it was just about agriculture, but in fact it could be about anything. It's just that they were opening the window so far. Now, Ruth, just to mention, this is the catalog from 1932. So here, let's, if you can see that. Designed primarily for homemakers, graduates can find employment in vocations relating to homemaking. Demand for teachers of home ec, dietitians, nutrition, lunchroom managers, social workers, designers, etc. Salaries which compare very favorably with those of other vocations requiring special training. One thing that I always liked was, you know, Lola Tilley had to quit her job, you know, at the university before the war because she got married, which is it. And, you know, in those days, if you got married, you had to quit, you know. But then President Bennell called her up after the war started and changed his mind about that. You know, he didn't. It wasn't so much of a you know, detriment, I guess. What other questions? I'll just find the catalog. Yeah, or Ron. Yeah.
Do all states qualify?
Yeah.
And I wonder about some of the early places like Rhode Island.
Yeah, they all qualify. Matter of fact, in this report, some years ago, I did this report with when Brian was the vice president. Okay, here's Land Grant College Without the Land, History of the University of Alaska's Federal Land Grant. I must admit, this was a little bit of an advocacy piece that we did. Then went to Senator Murkowski, and then a lot of the environmentalists got really mad about this because, you know, when not Lisa, Frank, you know, this was in Frank was because basically we wanted to get more land from the feds, and the problem is the historical problem has been that Alaska, our whole land grant system is completely different from all the other states. We got quantity grants, not in place section grants. And that's why we didn't get just 100 million acres. We got 103 and whatever the various is. Some of that land in there was supposedly for higher ed. Now, this was not seen this way by President Wood, President Patty. It sure as heck was seen that way by Governor Egan, and the state bureaucrats, state officials fought the university for years about getting additional land. Now, I think we did get some land, right? A couple of years ago, right? I didn't pay attention. Does anybody remember there was a whole thing in the legislature of getting more land? I don't know. But anyway, to distinguish what's important, land for revenue is different from land on the campus site. And I must say, the year that I was asked to do this report, yeah, it was 1993. I'm down at the guy with this guy who works for Brian, and I look up on this wall and think, this big map, and it says Walmart. And it was right before they announced their big plan to sell the farm down there to Walmart, which I thought was a terrible idea. And I'm thinking, oh God, you know. So I was glad that that got shut down. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a big problem. So, but anyway, what am I doing here? Oh, okay. Let me, here's the, I love this picture because it shows that we did everything here. This is it was a postcard that somebody had sent out back east, and you can see what it says on there. There's the gym on the 3rd floor, calculus. This is the main building. History of ed, domestics, home, I can't say science, I can't see that. President's office. Now what I loved about this, and I can't remember if Bill Cashin said this or not, so the gym is up here, right? And the whole thing, so whenever the gym was in session, you know, you couldn't really use these floors here because it was so noisy. Oh, that's right, there's another thing in here, and I guess I cut it off. There's somebody else, their office sort of down there. But it includes everything. Now, here's sort of the aerial history I sometimes give of the university. This is 1925, and that's the main building. And this is as the collegian said, no, we can let go of the controls at 500 feet, and while the plane shot downwards, he used both hands to snap the picture, riding the ship as it dived close above the roof of the main building, which is like, probably not a good plan. But this is 29, 38, and then again, this is the Washburn picture. Oh yeah, good, I put this in here. This is something that University Relations dug out. This is the Scarlin cabin in this picture. Because the original is such high quality, you can actually see it. So Moore and Bartlett are right here, and the Scarlin cabin is here, right there, and there. So now the 1940s, here are the two gems, the Allison building and Simon Hall. Actually, maybe I put this in here. No, I guess I didn't. Doggone it, I didn't put Unit 5 in here after all. But let me say something about Unit 5. Yeah. Okay, Unit 5 is that right there. Can you guys see that? I don't know if you can see it. Yeah. That's Unit 5 consisted of the first floor of the Eielson building, which was concrete, and the second and third stories were a wooden building stuck on top of it. And it was in use for a long time, you know, gosh, till the 70s almost, I think.
Did he live there? Didn't Bunnell live there?
He didn't live there. I think we might have put more in there, I think. I'm not sure. Now, Bunnell's house is sort of down over here, you know, and now the house. But one thing, these buildings were never painted in those early days. And George Rogers told me when he got to the university in 1950, he came and he said, Terrence, I'm telling you, I thought I was in the gulag. And Bunnell insisted the buildings never be painted because he thought the legislature would think that was a real waste of money. So you see, this is not.
Miners Hall, there's a tower.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and that was also the start of a shaft that went down for mining, for student underground mining, and came out at the bottom of a hill near the Atkinson power plant.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And I know, and they put the bells up here, right? Wasn't that it? This is right. Oh, I don't know. It's between the Greening Building. The Greening Building now is right on the other side of this. And this was torn down in the 70s, I think. Well, okay, that's a good, glad you pointed that out. Nothing else in here is still standing except for these two things. Let me see. Well, that's the 50s, 70s. Okay, so, okay, there's that. Let me see if I have this other one I can show you. Oh, here it is. That's Unit 5 right there. So you see, this is what I think. To me, the Eielson building is symptomatic of the land grant history of the university. Now you notice it's not painted, right? Beautiful concrete. And because it's built in sections, right? So that's why when you go into the Eielson building, you notice that one hallway that doesn't go anywhere, it's shut off. I think there's a Xerox machine or something in there now. But you can see they left open these wooden passages for when the building was eventually going to be built. See, that's the north end right here. And you see it matches this thing on that end, right? So I don't know what you call that, but whatever it is, that's what it is. And so this is called Unit 5. And it was there for over 20 years, I think. I think so. I can't remember now exactly. But then it was subsequently moved to like sort of down here, and then it was torn down, I think, 60s or 70s. But you'll see they were connected. The two ends of the Eielson building were connected by this little passageway right there. It's like a little tunnel. But what's great about this is, okay, so it's like the land-grant college. This is, they're emulating other colleges back east, but there's no ivy ever on these walls, and hell, there's no paint. Yeah, Joy.
When was the experimental farm built, and what part of the Morrill Act was it?
That actually comes from originally it's laid out in 1905, and that doesn't have anything directly to do with the Morrill Act, because agricultural experiment stations were all over Alaska. We had one, there was one in Rampart, Copper Center, Sitka.
There were 7 experimental stations. Experiment stations started with the Hatch Act of 1890, but the first experiment station was in Sitka, and my understanding is unique in that it reported directly to the director of experiment stations at USDA. It didn't have a state structure because we weren't a state at that point, and so it became a lot later in our history.
The difficulty thing, the interesting thing, Joy, is that, okay, let me go to this, is that, okay, here's a map. Well, let's see here. All right. Here's a map of the farm from 1905. Did I have 1905? Let me zoom out so you can see the whole thing. This is from my book on the university. Is it in focus or not? Is it? Okay. So the farm exists first, long before the university's ever thought of. And so Wickersham's only idea is that this is south-facing slope. It's on the railroad, the narrow gauge railroad, which is right there. That's the narrow gauge railroad right here. And when the Alaska Railroad bought this old narrow gauge, that's the right-of-way. So that's why the railroad is right down there at the foot of the hill. This is right where Cheetah Pump Road used to come out. This is right where it runs around it curves around the farm that way. So the reindeer and stuff are like in here, sort of right now. But the difficult thing is that, and here's an early picture of produce in Fairbanks. The struggle always was between the experiment station and the university. There were some real problems in the 20s and 30s, which is more like bureaucratic stuff. And so here's the farm. Let's see, that way. And you can see Estradome in the back. In the barn. I'm sure some of those buildings are still sort of down there. So that's the core of the university in that sense, is that was the experiment farm. But let me go back just for a second to Unit 5. So this is this famous picture when this guy crashed his airplane into the building trying to kill his girlfriend in the 40s, and he died in the plane crash. But this is the So they built that end of the building, and they built, this is concrete, you can see that, right? They got this wood building sitting on top of it, because President Bunnell never wasted anything. He reused everything, because this was, even though this was our funding source, the land, we had no land, almost no land. It was around 9,000 acres. The fairgrounds here in Fairbanks was a part of our university land that we sold, this part, Section 33. That's where the fairgrounds are now. Okay, so what I love is these two things here, and I think, let's see if I have it in the next picture. Oh, good, I left it in here. This is the Allison building today. I want you to look at right there. So the building never was completed, and it was supposed to be connected by a building going sideways, so it's still got that wooden panels there that can be knocked out when somebody thinks that the Allison building should be expanded. Now, in 1950, President Moore took over the university. He hired an architect to get rid of, everything that Bunnell did, and which is why then, they fired President Moore. But so this never happened. And an architect said, the Allison building here, that's the Allison building, he said, is an architectural monstrosity and it shouldn't be duplicated. And look, the whole thing was they were going to duplicate it everywhere. They were all supposed to look like that. So I guess we could say it's a good thing that the Allison building stands, but that it never had progeny, except Signers Hall. Signers Hall was part of this. It's supposed to be the administrative complex here, and they never built it. But anyway, I've talked too long, I think. Does anybody else have any more questions? Or yeah?
I've got a question in the same frame as the one previous about forestry experiment stations. I know I've seen a sign here.
Oh, yeah. The forestry came in the 60s, I want to say. Dr. Wood brought that in there.
Say that was the Forest Service. The name forestry actually came in 1976, I believe.
Was that right? Okay.
Yeah. It used to be the Institute of Agricultural Sciences, but I think it was 70, no. Yeah, it was around 76 it became the Agricultural and Forestry Experiment Station. But I think you're right. I think forestry became unofficially part of it in the late 60s. That's when I think Keith Van Cleve and some of those people
Yeah.
came.
Well, think about this, that forestry, mining, agriculture, engineering, nursing, home economics, none of these things actually would have been included in classical education because really that was for the upper class. See, that's the other part of this. This is actually what the best history of is called Democracy's College. This is the democratization of higher education for good and bad. Now, the bad part of it is we accept everyone. And we've always accepted everyone. And a lot of people probably shouldn't be accepted. But the theory's been that if somebody is willing to work hard enough and persevere, they can have an opportunity, unlike in the European model, where the kids are shut out. Could be by the time you're 10 or 11 or 12 years old, that's the end of it. You're never going to go to college. And so I'm a graduate of the university, and I think, I wish I had known more about what it meant to be a land-grant college when I was a student, because I didn't know. And I think we should tell everybody this. This is a radical thing, and we're so incredibly lucky that this actually happened to exist. And in most parts of the world, they never had anything like this. Yeah, Ross.
Yeah, Terrence, because land transfers and land management is like almost always controversial,
Yeah.
right? And I'm wondering if there was any controversy
Yeah.
about the land grant with respect to like private land ownership or native land.
Not in down in the States. I think they granted about 12 million acres to the support of land grant colleges, something like that, 10 or 12 million acres. That's a drop in the bucket compared to what they gave to the railroads, which is around, I think, 250 million acres or something like that. It's the size of Texas. I think that's about that. So the railroads got the size of Texas. Colleges got, what's 10 million acres? I don't know. 1/4 of the size of Pennsylvania, probably. I don't know. Not that much. So, and in Alaska, the only controversy was the land grants never materialized because of the lack of surveys. But the reality is that cash funding is a lot better than land funding. But land funding was all they could do in the 19th century. But all the scholars see this is the start of if you want to think of the start of the NSF, this is actually, it's the land grant formula from the very beginning, that there'll be federal money put in the game and not just from the states or churches, because that's the difference. This is now the federal government putting its oar in the water to help increase the human capital of the country. Yeah, Ron.
But then they transferred that responsibility to the state. Did they manage it?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. The one thing they did in the land grant formula, they gave them the land and said, do kind of what you want with it, and they have certain rules. I know my sister-in-law, Debbie, has to do the federal report. She says that's really complicated. Like every year we have to do this report, right? What happens if we don't do the report?
We're going to find out on May 1st.
Okay, that's right. I mean, we're not going to do it. Well, let me just show you. This is a memo from Dr. Patty to the Board of Regents, written in 1960. Okay, so see, they wanted to get this land grant. They started with this million-acre land grant already in the first year of statehood, right? Let's see, this way. So, let's see, here we go. Is it out of focus now? Yes. Let's see, how do you focus? Okay, so look at that. So this is Patty's telling the Board of Regents. Governor is mad. He's indicated the legislature passed this bill. He would veto it. Several members are anxious and willing to put the bill. Did not encourage them. So it became extremely as the world's gotten smaller, the land problems become more and more and more complicated. You know, because the world is smaller. The world's a lot smaller now. Because in the old days, you know, the world was 4 miles an hour. That's how big it was. You could walk, and now it's 400 miles an hour, and that means it's a lot smaller place. So, when I did all this research on this, I was really struck by how long the university kept trying to get additional land, and I'm embarrassed now that I don't remember, but I think the legislature finally did something. See, remember the legislature approved something and Tony Knowles vetoed it, and then there was something subsequent to that, and I think maybe when Frank was governor, I don't remember. I'm sure it wasn't when, you know, Pam was governor. Okay, so we should probably be done, I guess, right?
Any more questions?
Okay, one more question.
Yeah, can you say exactly what the sea and space grants are, other than that we study? We don't own specific meters of vacuum, I don't imagine.
Well, you know, I don't know if anybody, I think it's our mission. Susan, do you know?
The Sea Grant program is a federal funding program which allows for the Marine Advisory Program, essentially an extension program that goes to coastal community and helps them to use marine resources more wisely and has several other functions. And so it's a federal funding program
cash
more than
funding,
anything else. And Space Grant is a little bit different. It provides educational grants. It's a smaller program funded by NASA to provide educational grants to students and faculty, supports some research, supports the CubeSat program where students build satellites to launch, things like that.
And Susan, by the way, you guys know, is the provost, so she's the academic, you know, in charge of us for the university. One thing I'll say is that, and that's a really good question about the difference, see, because the land grant wasn't just to study land, right. and it's actually far broader than the sea and space. That's why I'm saying it's a little bit, also because it's a century later, the world is so vastly different. Now there is federal funding, because we had the Geophysical Institute starting in 1949, but the land grant idea is far more radical. It's pilled colleges all over the place. Every single state or territory is going to be able to get one. And somebody said, so the District of Columbia has one. There's several Native American land grant colleges. They got in lieu of land money.
All 6 island territories have land grant institutions.
1890 colleges.
1890s colleges.
The black colleges.
Historically black
colleges.
Are land grant institutions.
And now and that was in the Jim Crow era. That's partly one reason why. So the historically black colleges was partly an answer, because in some of these states they weren't going to let black folks in. So and remember, that's after the South has been reconstructed.
Equal in that
yeah,
period.
yeah. Now, just to show you here, this is I love this ad, just to show you. So it's in the I think late 20s, but just to show you. So ag, business administration, chemistry, civil, education, general science, home ec, geology, mining, minerals, and then it says it's a virile young territorial college. I don't know, and it's designed for young men and women, so I guess women are virile, or is that a subject to men? I don't know, but this is when. But look at this. I want to point this out though to you. Some people think, you know, they would just hire anybody to the faculty here. Some people have accused that to me, but look at that. Carefully selected. And the thing is, yeah, exactly. Well, the thing is, Ernest Greening, I found a note that he wrote to Bob Bartlett in a letter one time. And, you know, of course, Bunnell was president of the university for 28 years, and they had to kick him out, scheming, you know, and when they fired him, they said, you know, he refused to move out of his office in the Eielson building. That actually might have been in Unit 5. Maybe that was in the bottom. He refused to move out of his house, so he lived in his house until he died. And President Moore had to live in the faculty housing, and, you know, it was really a bad thing. But so Greening said, you know, Bunnell, the only thing that lasted at the university was Bunnell. Because he always said the faculty come and go, but he's there because basically everybody served at his wish. I mean, if he wanted you gone, you know, you were gone.
That's
Like
part of the carefully selected part.
that's right. They had to get along with him. So, but anyway, well, thank you guys all very much, and here, sure, yeah.